You have to destroy the brain to kill a walker in The Walking Dead. Try to do that with your bare hands and things will quickly get messy. Plus, if you get that up close and personal, the chances of getting infected or overpowered become pretty unappealingly high. Best to use a weapon. Anything that will put that rotten corpse down for good is essential for anyone who doesn't want to quickly become one of them. In Walking Dead No Man's Land, you have everything from sniper rifles to golf clubs, handguns to hand saws, and there is no doubt that some weapons are going to do the job you need them to do better than others. What makes one weapon more effective than another? The main thing is the traits. These are inbuilt abilities that affect how the weapon works. If it's a unique weapon, it may have infused traits, effectively a free one, bumping the total number it adds up to 4 instead of the usual 3. As is the case with armor and survivors themselves, rarity matters. A gold-coloured legendary weapon has more base damage and more effective traits than those of a lower standard, and the best weapons, they often have a little something special to make them stand out. Now before we begin, it's probably worth going over the most important thing. Where and how do you actually get hold of the good stuff? Whenever you complete a standard mission, like Scavenge or Weekly Challenge, you get your mission reward crates, and these can contain weapons. Story mode and the distance also allow you to acquire weapons through playing. You can purchase weapons with in-game currency via the Guild War shop, Black Market and Trade Goods shop. If you want to splash some real-world cash, check out purchasable bundles, and you can often get a unique weapon at the end of the premium Survival Pass event. It's worth bearing in mind there may not be a definitive best weapon for any class. The type of mission you're in counts for a lot. If you absolutely cannot afford to make any noise, you're going to need something a little more discreet than an RPG launcher. The chainsaw and Morningstar Mace are excellent warrior weapons, but I might prefer to have Michonne revving that diesel-powered tree chopper because it causes more damage and her leadership trait takes effect after a kill. I would rather see Ezekiel swinging that mace because its ability to bat the enemy away plays very nicely into the way his trait works. They're both excellent weapons, it's just, it kind of depends a little bit on the situation you find yourself in as to which is better. As ever, it's tactics and positioning that counts above all else, including that tool of destruction that you have in your hands. Yeah, certainly the right weapon will give you an advantage, but that's only if you're using the team to their potential. Oh yeah, and by the way, these are just my opinions based on my experiences. If anyone else out there has any favourite weapons that they want to throw some light on, go for it, please do. Let's do this class by class, and first up is the one that gets close and nasty, the Scouts. This class doesn't absorb damage so well, but they can certainly deal it out, causing the highest base damage of any class, typically to one enemy at a time, although many of the best Scout weapons make it so that you can take on a bunch of enemies at once. Best heroes here are Survivalist Rick with his charge attack boosting lead by example trait, Huntsman Daryll with his sneaky prowl ability, and if you've got to search stuff, that lucky dumpster that Glenn's all about certainly comes in handy. Ruthless, Lucky, Weaken, Dodge and Perseverance are just fantastic traits to have on a Scout. Dodge, Lucky, Ruthless, Primed and Hazard Suit are all attractive armor traits. For their weapons, there's value in Swift Strike, Threat Reduction, Charging, Lucky, Destructive, Interrupter, and maybe Ensnare. Destructive makes your horrifyingly powerful charge attacks all the more deadly, letting a Scout do what it's supposed to do with even greater efficiency and reliability. Your charge attacks will be, well, destructive. Swift Strike lets you stick and move. You should be making a kill when you land a hit, so being able to hit another target or get away from a clump of walkers who will otherwise be coming for you, it's priceless. Interrupter, well, if you can't run away, being able to just stop the enemy in their tracks is really nice, especially if you have something like the Primed trait on your armor. Charging gives you a chance to get an extra charge point after a kill. Scouts are there to cause damage, and nothing causes damage like a Scout's charge attack, so being able to do those more often, it's yeah, it's pretty lovely. Ensnare, well, it kind of depends on the weapon, but if it's something with a longer reach than usual, or you can otherwise get away from what you just hit, it's always really nice to pin the enemy to where they are, instead of letting them get to where they want to be. Threat reduction gives your scouts a compelling role in the group, not only taking down what's on the field of battle there and then, but removing potential future threats too. I mean, it's a little bit mission dependent, you know, it does completely depend on whether there is a threat counter there, but it can be a literal lifesaver in missions where an otherwise overwhelming threat counter keeps ticking over and over. Lucky makes all luck-related traits more likely to kick in. It's a welcome trait on anyone and anything wherever you can get it. Now, let's have a look at my favourite weapons for scouts. I am a huge fan of this, the Bayonet Musket. This bizarre and unique weapon has a good setup of traits, but it's the fact that you can jab with the bayonet up to 2 spaces away, getting up to 3 enemies at a time, which makes it a lot of fun. Being able to get the enemy without them getting you, something that's usually an occupational hazard for scouts, it's really useful. What just tips this thing over the edge from effective and fun to an insane laughter generator is the charge attack. A ranged hunter-esque attack on a scout weapon. It can hit up to 6 targets at once, and you get that wisp of smoke from the barrel. This antique is just a literal game changer, bending the established rules of the class, just like all the best weapons and heroes do. Other notable proponents of this stabby arts include the Sawtooth Blade, which essentially has 5 excellent traits including charging, destructive, razor, and essentially a guaranteed swift strike and threat reduction. Mercer's axe and the Crescent edge have a fantastic set of traits that couldn't help but make them amazing. I've not personally used either of these in battle yet, but you know, I really am looking forward to the day when I do. Really want to give them a go. And you should too. Bruisers. They're not really there to dole out damage and mayhem, so their weapons kind of serve a different purpose from most others. The best individuals of this type are Riot Gear Glenn and T-Dog, although Eugene's got some moves too, not to mention his hair. Your big and burly individuals would do well to have Lucky, Dodge, Punish, Retaliate, Iron Skin, and Weaken. Best Bruiser armor is going to be rocking Primed, Dodge, Hazard Suit, Stun Resistance, Lucky, Health Boost, and Iron Skin. Great weapon traits here are Interrupter, Lucky, Concussion, and Tactical. Also, the more enemies you can hit, the better, so if you can find a weapon that can hit 2, maybe 3 enemies, more with a charge attack, definitely gets a thumbs up. Interrupt is great because you're expecting to be a wall against which the tide of undead smashes itself to pieces. So obviously Interrupter, being able to hit them before they hit you, you know, it's a natural good fit for a bruiser's weapon. Concussion means that you do what you're ideally going to be doing, KOing the walker, only you're going to be doing it a lot better, making them knocked out for 2 rounds instead of 1. Tactical can be useful, allowing you to reposition after striking while also taking less damage. They're both really good things to have on a bruiser. Ensnare is another one of those things that just makes your bruisers keep their targets right where you want them. Lucky, been over that, always useful on everyone and everything. So, let's have a look at my favourite bashy things. Luke's Gear Mace. Hits a lot of things all at once, it can stun them, and when it does, it keeps them out of action for longer. It has a sort of double dip charge attack, lets you have this fantastic multi-hit critical, and then you can just hang out and do what you want right after as well. Move, attack, you get a free action afterwards. Morgan's Staff, Festive Lucille, the Winter Hockey Stick, they're right up there doing pretty much the same thing, but I think Luke's Gear Mace is the best looking of these kinds of weapons. Another standout is the Riot Shield. It hits multiple targets, has good traits, but it's that herd smash special attack which really really makes it stand out. And Herd Smash special attack is really hard to say, by the way, just putting it out there. Anyway, that special attack lets you take a hold of the situation like nothing else does. Leading those walkers about like Pied Piper of Rotten Corpses, it makes the shield fantastic. Warriors. They can hit a couple of targets at once. Their damage is okay. They can do an okay job of taking a hit. I'm kind of making them sound boring here, but they are pretty cool and they do have a role to play in your team. Best in class are Ezekiel and Beta, but Michonne's had a recent boost and she's pretty darn good now too as well. Especially if you have that Season 3 sort of cloak look. Awesome. Best traits for Slice and Dicers include Lucky, Ruthless, Perseverance, and Weaken. Dodge is kind of nice since you don't need to tough out a hit if you can just wiggle your hips and get out of the way. Armor looks good with Primed, Hazard Suit, Ruthless, Lucky, Dodge, maybe a health boost and Iron Skin if you expect to get smacked around a bit. What you want for your weapons on Warriors is Wide Arc, Destructive, Tactical, Interrupter, maybe Ensnare or Crippling. Depends on what you're doing with your warrior. If you can, it's a good idea to consider picking those rare implements that increase the range of your warrior weapon, so you don't have to go nose to nose socket with whatever undead thing is coming at you. The Morning Star is perhaps my favourite thing to bring to the fight with a warrior. It has the ability to swat away the enemy, pushing them out of attacking range after you make your strike, and best of all, those individuals that you send flying get stunned and in turn have a chance to stun what they hit. Give it to a character like Ezekiel and it's hard for anything to reach you. If you want to go on the offense, you can stun a clear path for your survivors to an exit or whatever you need. Also, you never make a sappy body shot against the main target of an attack made on your turn. It's a wonderful weapon. If you don't have it, I put this at the top of the list. The chainsaw causes so much damage it will make you blush. It has some nice traits and that helps, but the main thing is that it strikes twice with each attack. That's crazy. Hit human and you can easily kill them outright. The first hit takes them to the red health bar, the second one takes that away too. Got a charge attack? You're going to do that Leatherface from Chainsaw Massacre thing and spin around like a deadly ballerina, making attacks that further ignore the target's damage reduction. It'll turn walkers and enemy survivors into ground beef in no time flat. Dragon's Tongue is a warrior weapon I haven't used that much, but I can see why it gets a lot of appreciation. It lets you keep your distance and hits a whole lot of targets at once, which is great coupled with that ensnare trait, and it looks so elegant. It brings a touch of class to the gore-soaked massacre. Shooters. Hit hard, stay at a distance. It's a pretty good tactic. Yumiko is the queen of the class, with Rick and Hilltop Maggie making a pretty good account of themselves too. Ruthless and Lucky are really lovely to have on your gunslingers, and I'm a fan of critical aim. That's an unpopular opinion, but I stand by it. It's come in handy a few times for me. It looks good if you accessorize your armor with some Lucky, Ruthless, and Primed. They really benefit this class. On this class's offensive tools, I'm always looking for high-powered, incendiary, crippling, ensnare, destructive, charging, and interrupter. High-powered increases your range and is just a gift that keeps giving. It provides freedom when positioning your survivor, since it means you can hit what you need to hit from a place of your choosing. It also means you get to punch more rounds into anything before it gets to you. The farther away you can stay when dealing with other humans, the more wacky their behaviour is. It's like the AI doesn't really handle humans very well, so this is always a top trait, whether you're taking on enemies that breathe or those that don't. Destructive makes your already hard-hitting charge attack hit even harder. That's kind of really handy if you're in a class that is there to deal damage. Charging gives you a chance to stock up on those devastating critical strikes more often. It's always nice when you're a premium damage dealing class. Interrupter is just fantastic, meaning you can just reach out far away and stop whatever your target wants to happen from happening. It gives you more control over the battlefield. Crippling helps you and helps your team. You're reducing the enemy to one spot of movement, which is always helpful. Against speedy walkers and melee humans, you are rendering them virtually entirely ineffective. Ditto in snare. It's even better if you can stop walkers from walking altogether. Incendiary, which is only available on select unique weapons, ignites the enemy, causing them to take damage every single turn. This is incredible on especially tough walkers or metalheads, that kind of thing that you would normally not have much of an effect on. You can see how Incendiary and Crippling is a perfect pairing, with the latter buying more time for the former to do its work. As a shooter, you've got some weapons available that have some really class-bending effects. There are a couple of bows that are favourites of mine. The Assassin's Bow causes extra damage, and in a class that is there to cause damage, that's pretty useful. It can cripple what it hits, it has fantastic reach, and it is entirely silent. It's very handy if you need to be a little bit sneaky. If you need to go even further down that route, the Assassin Bow's littler and cuddlier sister, the Hunting Bow, is not only as demurely quiet, it reduces threat too. So if stealth is a priority, consider these bows. The Pulverizer is pretty much the opposite. It's big, brash and noisy. It makes a ton of sounds, and it has a pretty impressive small blast area effect that can strike up to 9 targets at once. And that's with full shooter class damage. Pretty impressive. This is more something to bring along if you want a fun weekend, but it does have its uses. The Saviour Handgun is probably my favourite all-round shooter weapon. The flare gun can set targets alight. Rick's Alexandria pistol can cripple targets. The Saviour's shooter does both at once. It still has that long range, and I kind of think it looks really smart as well. Hunters cause a fair amount of damage, and they do have a bit of range behind their attacks. They can also get a few enemies all at once. Best in class here is the all-time MVP Sasha. Guardian Carol is close second. Shane is a heck of a lot of fun too. Some nice traits to have on these guys is Lucky and Ruthless, and again, still a fan of critical aim. Come at me. Lucky, Ruthless, Charged and Primed make a hunter's armor look good. You broadly have two weapon types here as well for your hunters, rifles and shotguns. Shotguns have the same range as most rifles, but their widespread means that you hit more enemies at a time, and you get a nice damage boost if you're within just a couple of squares of your target. So really, shotguns are kind of better than rifles. Anyway, let's go through the traits. So widespread is great for rifles. It's unnecessary and unavailable for shotguns. Lucky, Destructive, Charging, Ensnare, Incendiary, and Interrupter are excellent to have when you are out hunting. My favourite weapons in any class always seem to bend the rules for that class, and it's no different for the hunters. The Harpoon Gun is really interesting. The Winter and Crimson variants are silent, and it has some good traits, but what makes it an absolute winner is the fact that it only needs 2 charge points to make a charge attack, and that charge attack roots a single target to the ground, rendering it incapable of moving. It's a massively impressive rifle. If you have a weapon that ignites a target, and you have something like the Harpoon that keeps them still, doesn't matter how tough that enemy is. They're a flaming scarecrow waiting to burn to a cinder if you hit them with that combo. Now, Daryll's Lookout Rifle has a nice set of traits, being able to stop the enemy and set them alight so they just stood there burning to their doom. We've gone over how nice that is. But I think that the Festive shotgun just inches it out as a top tier choice. With that shotgun spread, it ignites a lot of enemies at once, and that close-up damage boost and the twinkly little fairy lights wrapped around it just make it feel so Christmassy all year round. Finally, the Starbound Rifle is a full-blooded sniper rifle. Though the damage does tail off after 6 squares, it can target anything on the map, anywhere it may be, and anything in the round's path gets struck. You can land a lot of hits on a target before it gets to you, and this thing makes a mess of the AI's human behavior routines. Where, you know, if you see them stood on the other side of the map, being struck round after round, they just stand there not having an idea what to do about it. It almost feels like cheating, and if you haven't experienced it, I recommend it. Finally, assaults. They're really there to hit a lot of enemies at once, though they may not cause a lot of damage. They're all about quantity of hits. Their best weapons tend to be able to apply a blanket of status effects over a large number of enemies at once. Of these guys, Mercer is absolutely magnificent. Princess is perfect if you have a lot of status affecting weapons in your team, and Rosita, she just keeps on turning out to be really useful whenever I bring her to battle, so I'm kind of a fan. The traits you're looking for on your assault guys are ruthless and lucky for sure. Everything else, just give it a try, see what works. Armor for these guys could do with primed, ruthless, and lucky. Hazard suit and dodge can be handy since you usually have to wind up close to the enemies, but really you want to be avoiding taking hits if you can with this class. It's not what they're there for. On your weapons, widespread is fantastic. Lets you have assaults do what they're supposed to do and strike more enemies at once. Lucky is very helpful in any number of circumstances. Do kind of like tactical on an assault weapon. They're usually pretty short range, so being able to take a shot and move away can be very beneficial for that class. Ensnare and cripple, both great. Being able to trammel so many enemies' movement at once is just really damn nice. It's very helpful. If you have a stun attack on your weapon, then concussion is very good to have too. If we're looking at favourites in the big and brash department, the Decimator's got to be included. This is a hardcore favourite. It has a gigantic blast template and it hits loads of enemies all at once, and you can kind of shoot around corners and unexplored regions of the map. You can target the ground instead of enemies with a charge attack which stuns huge crowds. This grenade launcher is certainly noisy, but it's a quintessential weapon for this class. Daryll's assault rifle does more than just look really funky. It can root the enemy for a turn. If you're struggling to take down walkers, being able to just pin them in place, maybe set them on fire, or have Mercer's man-at-arms skill chip away at some hit points is just amazing. It's silent too, for some reason. It comes in handy every now and again, it doesn't create any threat, but that makes no sense. Still, don't look a gift rifle in the barrel. Rosita's assault rifle does something similar to Daryll's. It has a great infused trait that can cripple an enemy hit with a body shot. So it slows the toughest enemies that you might face. Very useful. The charge attack stuns rather than roots, but stun doesn't affect every enemy type while root does. Rosie's shooter also makes that bang bang sound, unlike Daryll's rifle. So I kind of like to think of these two weapons as kind of cousins. Sometimes one is more useful than the other, and that depends on the situation, but I'm a fan of both. Finally, the Obliterator has some really fun aspects. It's got some decent traits, and it has a very long range for an assault rifle. The charge attack is a Decimator style, massive area stun inflicting blast, and while that still makes noise, the standard attack from this rifle does not. Again, it's inexplicable. I still don't get it, but I'm still not complaining. Alright, so there are my thoughts on what works when you're trying to put the undead down. Feel free to try out different weapons in different combinations, see what works for you. Get talking in the comments if you have any other thoughts about what works, and in the meantime, happy hunting. And as ever, thank you for watching.